Hey Alex, it's everyone, and welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week, the weekly series where I showcase the top 10 best decks in Marvel Snap. And if you'd like to support the content, consider hitting that like button. It's free and it's sincerely all that YouTube cares about, as it helps this content tremendously as we talk about the top 10 decks of the week. Now, what I will say is that this week being the first week of the new season, a couple things worth noting. As always, we are using the cube rate in order to determine the ranking order this week. This is because we don't have enough post-infinite games in order to get a legitimate sample size. So we use the cube rate, and then we use a secondary characteristic as the win rate in order to determine the ranking. It's also worth noting that the statistics we do utilize the bot games from rank 70 to 100. It simply gives us the best indication or best sample size of which decks are doing the best. And so just do keep that in mind that this week is different given the fact that it is the first week of the season. With that being said, we're starting with deck number 10, and this is Sauron, running a 62% win rate and a 0.80 cube rate. This is doing remarkably well, and in post-infinite stats last week, this was actually the top deck of the week. One of the things that this deck does really well right now is that it incorporates Enchantress in a very natural way. When I've been playing on my own spare time and not working on the weekend missions and stuff, I've been playing this deck and crushing people because of the amount of ongoing going on, whether it's the Captain Carter ongoing stuff for the weekend missions or it's the gore negative stuff, which becomes very popular as you get into like these kind of rank up games against players and bots. So Enchantress, absolutely key to crushing and stealing cubes right now. Might be one of the highest cube rate cards in the game right now. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. But the Sauron change to a 2 cost has allowed this archetype to really flourish. Starbrand feels fantastic on curve. There are so many great options with this particular deck. And so honestly, it does not surprise me that it's doing as well as it is. The latest version of this deck is actually utilizing armor, which was cut in the prior week's edition. But armor, if you don't have the Sauron, does act as a very good kind of safety net versus the Shang-Chi. So anyways, Sauron, number 10 in this week's top 10 ranking. And coming in at number 9, we do have the Carter 2099 deck. Now, there has been multiple variations of this deck. It started with my variation that ran Iron Man being the top performing one, and that has kind of changed into this Cosmo variant because, again, Enchantress is literally everywhere. The Cosmo variant, including the Blue Marvel, in order to get a little bit of extra verticality on the Doom 2099 bots themselves, as opposed to going the Iron Man route, which actually really punishes you against the Super Scroll, because Super Scrolls eating your Iron Man is just a lost lane for the most part, right? Of course, it's stealing your Larval is not great either, but in terms of like other decks that are teching in Super Scrolls, they really like that Iron Man, resulting in a deck here that runs a 58% win rate and 0.81 cube rate. And this is a pretty solid option for players that are looking to, once again, get that that combination of Goliath and Captain Carter route in order to kind of get their weekend missions done and, you know, get some value from their purchases, including Goliath and Captain Carter, considering the weekend missions are all based on ongoing in those two particular cards. The Doom 2099 variations of these decks, there's still a little bit going on, but they tend to be high performers, and in particular, very strong against human opponents as well. Against bots, you have a very consistent power output, so you're seeing a lot more like 4 cube games in my experience through the ranking process. But you do tend to have very favorable matchups against players, especially considering you have the Cosmo to protect against that Enchantress. So overall, Carter 2099, a great option for those looking to play some Doom 2099 with the Season Pass and the Card of the Week. Now, there are 2 discard decks in the top 10, and this one is the Coccia variant. Coccia is honestly a good card. It hasn't quite like completely taken over the archetype for discard, right? There are so many different ways to play discard right now, and it seems as though that the Frigga Dawkin Bullseye variation is going to be the best. It does so happen that Coccia does work effectively in those shells, because oftentimes on turn 6, you can do something like a Coccia and still be able to activate your, obviously your Bullseye and get the value generated there. So it does offer a very clean turn 6 opportunity. Coccia itself, running a 62% win rate and a 0.86 cube rate, is on the high side. The other thing that this deck does very well is it is effective against bots because it doesn't output as much power up front, and so they often can confidently snap into you, you snap back, and then on turn 6, you effectively rob them of their 8 cubes because you're able to utilize the Bullseye effect to good effectiveness, and I don't think the bot is accounting for that, and it's one of the reasons why this deck and some of the negative ones do so well, is because you're backloading your power and you're kind of baiting the bot into snapping on you, right? Will a player bite that well? No, of course not. But also, players tend to get destroyed by these Bullseye decks as well, because it has been consistently one of the top performing shells in the meta since Bullseye's release. Going to number 7, we have a new type of star brand, and this is a Sarah star brand deck. We're seeing a lot of decks run this Zabu package with a bunch of like the best 4 drops in the game, including Shang-Chi, Galacta, and Enchantress, and of course Gwenpool as well. Those 4 are being slotted in with Zabu, so a lot of like these like good stuff decks are Zabu plus 4 of these cards, right? It's like, and then the rest of the shell kind of goes around based off of what you're trying to accomplish. This particular one is using the Sarah combination, but honestly, it's running the Iron Patriot, which is still a good card, especially when you consider that Iron Patriot works really well with the likes of Juggernaut and Rocket and Groot. You have the Sam Wilson Captain America, which is, shouldn't surprise anyone, a fantastic card, especially with the ability to be flexible in where you're moving that shield and how you can generate some value. But overall, you have a fantastic tech arsenal of Shang-Chi, Galacta, Enchantress, and Gwenpool. Enchantress in particular being useful in the meta right now. So these types of like Zabu plus 4-drop decks are doing really good because of the amount of ongoing. So Enchantress just really increases your cube rate and your win rate, especially against ongoing players that aren't speccing with Cosmo, because Cosmo, although being an ongoing card, it's not greedy, right? So everyone's going those super greedy routes and not teching for protection against Enchantress, which allows decks like this to feast. And you're going to see more decks like this upcoming. If you're not interested in playing Doom 2099 but still want to lean into that Spectrum ongoing shell, this here is going to be the best version for you. Running a 57% win rate and a 0.93 cube rate, which is on the very high side from a cube rate perspective. You have a deck that's running the Ravonna Renslayer combination and the Captain Carter Iron Man. Now, I tend to appreciate versions of these decks with Mystique Iron Man that run the Moonstone, which could even allow Ravonna Renslayer to really go deep into what you can do with that Mystique, Mr. Fantastic, and Iron Man combination. So if you're looking to kind of cook with Moonstone, I would consider adding Moonstone to a deck like this. However, for the most part, this is statistically doing fantastic. And what I think has been a huge winner for Spectrum decks as a whole is not only the Goliath, which benefits from both Captain America, Sam Wilson, and his shield, both being ongoings, but Spectrum being a legitimate player here, because Spectrum benefits from both the shield and Sam Wilson being on the field to play, because Spectrum just wants inexpensive cards to hit for that +2. When you consider that speed tends to be a phenomenal card, although in this particular deck you do find yourself often skipping turn 1 because you only have the Ant-Man in the deck, overall, speed puts up good numbers, Cap is fantastic into the Iron Man and the Captain Carter synergy, and overall Spectrum is a great finisher, in particular against mirror matches where, like, you know, you might have them play a Gore against you, which your Super Scroll can pick up on, but their Super Scroll doesn't pick up on your Spectrum play. Right? And so I've found myself in situations where I'm playing against opponents where they're trying to lean into the ongoing synergy, and my Spectrum will kind of offset their Super Scroll and allow my Super Scroll to get that additional value to win a location. So that's worth considering. Mirror matches are kind of tricky right now with all the Super Scrolls, but if you're going to play some ongoing, this is also a fantastic choice. Going to number 5, Loki Tech. Once again, the thing that makes this deck so powerful is the combination of Zabu and those amazing 4 drops, Shang-Chi, Galacta, Enchantress, and Gwenpool. This deck also benefits from having Gorgon in it, although I do think that Gorgon, for the most part, is likely going to get cut from a deck like this, because there's no Agamotto in these top 10 at all. Like, Agamotto doesn't ultimately make this top 10. And so I start to wonder about Gorgon's usefulness as a tech piece if Agamotto himself doesn't actually continue to be a major meta player moving forward. You do also have the fantastic 2 drops of Iron Patriot and Sam Wilson. And again, you have your Loki as an alternate win condition, which is awesome. Copycat, fantastic into a lot of the ongoing synergies that are going on. And of course, you have the Rocket and Groot, which is great into both the Iron Patriot and into the, well, it's pretty much just an Iron Patriot card. It's not just an Iron Patriot card. I shouldn't devalue it like that. It's a great Iron Patriot card, and it's just a great card overall. So this deck here running a 62% win rate and a 0.96 cube rate is actually very, very good. It's currently the best version of Loki. Moving forward, I would expect the Gorgon to be cut and something to be added in its place. I mean, that's up to you. Even right now, if you want, cut Gorgon, put something else and add something spicy. You want to go crazy, right? Do something. Be creative. But, maybe even a Scarlet Witch. Imagine running Scarlet Witch in 2025. Don't run Scarlet Witch. Kind of useless right now. The type of card that needs a buff, What am I talking about? Anyways, Loki tech. I'm glad that Loki's kind of making a comeback. And this Loki change has made it very obvious to me that Pixie also needs to come down to 1 cost, despite the recent buff that it got. I think everyone can more or less agree with that. So that's Loki tech coming in at an impressive 62% win rate and a 0.96 cube rate. Clog has been one of those decks that has been, it's been kind of consistent for a while, Clog. And this here is a new take on it that features the Gore play. And I think the Gore is pretty interesting here because you do obviously have a lot of on reveals here. You have a lot of cards that benefit from the on reveal synergies. You have the Debris and the Viper combination. You have the Hood, the Viper combination of the Cape Bishop and the Acid Arrow, of course. Grandmaster providing some additional synergy as well. And Gore and Cannonball tend to just be fantastic cards. And these games where like your opponent, especially Sam Wilson, right? Like they're clogging themselves up a little bit with all these small pieces, and then like you're just playing more stuff, taking up their space. Doc Ock does a good job of kind of setting up your Cannonball Gore plays. So it doesn't surprise me that it's running a 60% win rate and a 0.97 cube rate. But what I find though, the primary risk and the times where I'm like, this is a little awkward, is when they do have some pretty good lines and they also have Super Scroll, which tends to offset the Gore play. Usually I can find a winning line with something along the lines of Cannonball, but it is worth noting that you are seeing Gore being stolen by a lot of Super Scrolls right now, considering they're in all the decks. I can't believe I'm saying Super Scroll as much as I am in my top 10. He's literally one of the most meta impactful cards in the game right now. But regardless, if you're looking to do something fun and interesting, Gore Clog is an option. One of the challenges this deck has as well is that seeing so many ongoing cards, Shadow King always has good hits, but some of the ongoing synergies, like something like a Goliath, doesn't care about, Shadow King. Like the ongoing cards don't get benefited, don't get negatively impacted by Shadow King for the most part. There's going to be some kind of circumstances where they are getting some permanent buffs, but for the most part, right, there's a lot of ongoing effects right now where Shadow King doesn't feast as much as he used to, but still probably an underappreciated card overall. And that's going to take us into our top 3, and we just finished talking about Gore, and we're going to continue talking about Gore because negative Gore at a 56% win rate and a 0.103 cube rate is still one of the best decks you can play in order to rank up. Now, it's being taken off the absolute top echelon. Like, I believe every time we do these, kind of top 10s in that first week with cube rates being the primary characteristic for the top 10 consideration, Gore is often near the absolute top. And this week he comes in at 3. The win rate is lower, and I don't want you to, be like, oh, well, this deck sucks because... No. The Mr. Negative decks have always traditionally had lower win rates. Because if you don't get Psylocke, and if you don't get Ravonna, and you don't have Mr. Negative, the winning lines feel much murkier. You usually snap into Psylocke or Ravonna into negative on turn 3, and that is where your winning conditions come from. But if you don't have that and they're snapping, you have to retreat, lowering your win rate. Part of the reason why the cube rate is so high is because bots will often stay into the games against these negative decks because you have so much negative power, and playing Mr. Negative on his own location and intentionally losing one of the locations can bait a bot snap. So this is one of those decks that when you pilot effectively against a bot, you're able to really sneak out extra cubes. You just kind of pull them away from these bots. The Super Scroll allows you the opportunity to compete more effectively against players, especially considering the amount of ongoing, and Super Scroll is one of the cards that actually isn't all that bad into something like a Mr. Negative, and of course you have the Jane Foster synergies and etc. What's most often happening is you're using the Gore into Taskmaster play in order to kind of generate some value. I've also found myself doing Sage into Taskmaster as well, considering that once flipped, they're both going to be free plays, and Sage does get absolutely massive, and is probably one of the most underappreciated cards in Marvel Snap right now. But overall, negative Gore, you've seen it before on the cube rate based deck lists here that we talk about, continues to be a phenomenal choice. Number 2, this is a surprising one and a hell of a cook. We have Enchanted Elsa running a 61% win rate and a 0.114 cube rate. This is great. I said that number wrong. 1.14 cube rate. It's nice to see Kitty Pryde making a bit of a comeback here. Jeff, Angela, Hope Summers, Copycat, which is so good into the ongoing shells right now. And once again, that Zabu shell of Shang-Chi, Enchantress, Galacta, and Gwenpool rounding out the deck. So many of the best decks in the game right now are Zabu, those 4, and then what other shell can we fit in with the remaining slots? And this particular shell utilizes the Copycat and Elsa Bloodstone to really good effectiveness. Copycat feasts in this ongoing meta. And Elsa, honestly, has felt like such an underperforming card, especially with the release of Galacta. Let's be honest, Galacta completely ate Elsa Bloodstone's lunch, so to see that a number 2 Cube Raid deck this week is featuring both is awesome. It's a hell of a cook, and I'm very happy that this is actually the one I'm looking forward. Once I get done with the weekend missions, which won't take me long, I'll just probably finish them in the next hour or so, I'm going to be ripping this deck because I'm just excited to be playing Jeff Rooney again, Kitty Pryde, Hope Summers, and listen, I got some, you can tell these are some of my favorite cards. Hey, look at these absolute fire variants. I know we're not talking about variants right now, but we got some absolute beauties here in this particular deck, because this is one of my favorite archetypes to play. The only thing missing here is I think I'm gonna do a bit of a little chef's cook here. I'm gonna cut a couple cards. I want Thena in this deck. I think Thena's missing, especially with the Hope Summers and Kitty Pryde play. So that's my take. Thena's gonna be in this deck somehow. But regardless, Enchanted Elsa. This is fantastic. We have a 61% win rate deck that's running the Elsa, Jeff, Kitty Pryde, Hope Summers combination, guys. Beautiful. I absolutely love it. And that's going to take us to our number 1 deck of the week. And I'm actually excited this week because it's a deck you've seen before, and it's going to feast on both bots and players. And you know what? If you're not subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I had to sneak that in somewhere, right? But actually, I'm surprised that a lot of people, that watch these videos aren't subscribed, like 40%. But I only ask that you consider subscribing. As we move on to our number 1 deck, it's Bullseye. It is gonna be Bullseye. Bullseye, so we talked about the Coccia version. This is the Arnim Zola based version, and it's surprising to me, and no, not necessarily surprising, but it's surprising to me that it ends up being the top deck so far, even beating out something like a negative Gore, which is phenomenal. I think it's great. And right now, again, in these early kind of ranking weeks, the bot play is somewhat being considered in the ranking of the decks because you are going to be facing bots and you're going to be facing players too. So you need a deck that performs well against both. This deck does exactly that. The negative Gore decks don't perform as well against players because players, especially skilled ones or high-ranking ones, will recognize the snap patterns and the retreat patterns to minimize your gains. With Bullseye, you are still seeing players thinking that you can 1v1 them. Moreover, what I have found in my playtesting with this particular deck, which honestly is one of my favorite because, this is a variation of my famous Bullseye cook, is that ultimately, the ongoing cards really get pumped by Bullseye. If you think about the hits on Mystiques and Iron Mans, those are very disproportionate hits because the Bullseye -2 is hitting cards that want to double power, and really lowering that power effect is significant. Every bit of power in an ongoing deck matters, and you're not only just nullifying the Spectrum play, essentially for free, but you're generating other value in the form of Morbius and stuff, and those decks aren't going to be running cards like Enchantress. Moreover, Morbius is one of the cards that Super Scroll hates because it's not going to get the benefit, right? You're not discarding anything as the ongoing player, so Super Scroll is effectively useless when a Morbius is on the other side of the board. It's one of the few ongoing interactions that generally just benefits the other ongoing player. Because I have Morbius, you have Scroll, you suck, I win. You know what I mean? So ultimately, Bullseye right now is the number 1 deck. You got the 61% win rate, 1.23 cube rate, ultimately resulting in the top deck in Marvel Snap this week. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you, and we'll see you on that next one.